From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
A new dairy store celebrates two great things, football and ice cream. See how they make it work in Louisiana. New developments after an E. coli outbreak is linked to McDonald's quarter pounders as drought and dryness impact harvest.
I have never in my career seen corn moistures drop as fast as they have this year.
And the movement of grain.
What typically happens is those costs are passed on to the farmer.
What it means for harvest and at the elevator right now on AgDay.
AgDay is brought to you by Pioneer.
Ben's bins, please hold.
Yeah, Ben's has been busy all day.
Seems like no one can keep up with this new Z series. What did you all put in these seeds?
Science.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Drought is expanding across the country for a third week in a row. The latest drought monitor is showing a huge increase in dryness. In fact, forecasters report all 50 states have at least some abnormal dryness. Now, taking a look at the latest map, it shows just under 50% of the country is experiencing moderate to exceptional drought. 16 states are seeing extreme drought and 5 states are experiencing exceptional drought. Now, most of the increase taking place in the eastern plains, Midwest and South. Growing drought couldn't come at a worse time as farmers harvest crops and barges move them along the Mississippi River. AgDay's Michelle Rook joins us. And Michelle, as if lower prices weren't enough, the lower water levels could also impact farmers' bottom lines.
Yeah, that's right. This is an unfortunate three-peat in regards to the historically low water levels on the lower Mississippi River. And it comes during the prime export window for soybeans. Now, while this isn't translating into lost export business for the U.S., it could have a negative impact on soybean basis levels and cash prices as higher transportation costs are passed down to farmers. Water levels on the lower Mississippi River are back down to the historic lows experienced in 2022 and 2023. At St. Louis, water levels rebounded with ample rain during spring and early summer, but both declined significantly past mid-July. The same pattern followed at Memphis, with the exception of a short-lived uptick in water levels due to Hurricane Helene.
So it did result in a pretty dramatic 15-foot plus spike in a short period of time. But now we're basically back where we were prior to the hurricane with low water levels resuming. And, the concern for that is that it impacts barge transportation.
Steenhoek says barge restrictions are once again lowering the number of barges in tow and how heavy barges can be loaded.
With every foot of reduced water depth or draft, that's the equivalent of loading 7,000 fewer bushels of soybeans in an individual barge. You can see an overall reduction of 10 to 15% on the modest end of the spectrum, all the way up to 30 to 40% reduction. So that's really considerable.
And that raises barge freight rates and cash basis takes the hit.
The shippers tend to not absorb that themselves. What typically happens is those costs are passed on to the farmer in the form of a lower price at that point of delivery or a more negative or wide basis.
And the timing couldn't be worse for soybeans as it's coming during harvest in the peak export window.
You've got to get those volumes moved because, again, South America is going to be a viable supply option come the first of the year, or certainly not long after that. So this is not ideal. Fortunately, the Panama Canal is in a better condition than it was a year ago. So that's one thing that's different.
However, more soybean exports will still be shifted to the rail system to move through the Pacific Northwest, thus raising rail costs, which are also passed on to the farmer. I'm Michelle Rook reporting for AgDay.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Now, one of those states where drought has continued to worsen is Missouri. Right now, 65% of the state is in drought. That's up 25% from just last week. Farm Journal's Tyne Morgan continues our coverage with a look at how that's impacting harvest.
The hustle of harvest is in full throttle.
Harvest is really coming quickly this year. We've really only had one rain delay since we started. It's been kind of a blur, honestly, the whole time.
Lafayette County, Missouri farmer Garrett Riekoff started harvest in early September this year with only about 3 days of rain delays so far.
I have never gotten through corn harvest in my memory with only one rain delay.
And as for corn, well, yields are impressive.
I would say this crop probably is second best. There'll be some fields that are record breakers.
He doesn't think this crop will top 2014 for him, but considering these fields didn't see much rain in late July or August, he's happy with this year's crop.
This year, we're still 100 plus in those very poor areas.
As for soybeans, he was only impressed with his earlier planted fields. But as he got deeper into harvest, his whole farm average soybean yield is turning out to be even worse than last year. And it's not just how dry this harvest has been, but how quickly the crop dried down that's catching area farmers by surprise.
We did start harvest when corn was about 21%, and I have never in my career seen corn moistures drop as fast as they have this year. They've dropped sometimes 1.5 points in a day.
In preparation for fall, Rieckhoff knew not only could it be quick, but storage this year could be a challenge.
Starting mid-July, early August, when I knew we were going to have great yields, I started to try to position myself to what are my plans going to be so that I can keep the machines rolling, so the crop doesn't get standing in the field till the 1st of December.
He says the grain bagger isn't an ideal option, but he knew it was the best option this year.
So the grain bagger, maybe not my favorite enterprise, but it really has worked well and created nice efficiencies to get the crop through, because I know there's been lines at elevators where trucks haven't gotten back to the field for an hour or two, and we're dumping on farm, dumping in a bag in the field, and trucks back to the field right away. So it's just no other way to do it. It's not easy. Nothing is, but thinking ahead and having a good plan of action has kept us moving.
Reporting for AgDay, I'm Tyne Morgan.
All right, thanks, Tyne. And recent droughts may play into this drop in irrigated cropland. The Economic Research Service putting out this chart of note, which shows in 2022, irrigated cropland reached a 30-year low with just under 55 million acres of cropland being irrigated. It represents a drop of roughly 3 million acres since the census in 2017. Now, experts say the decline was largely driven by decreases in the mountain region and the northern and southern plains. Now, you'll remember back in 2022, those regions saw heavy drought and in some cases restricted water supplies. But there are some chances for rain, at least in the Midwest. Meteorologist Jack Van Meter has an update for us.
And we are starting to see a little bit of rain starting this morning, actually especially around much of the Great Lakes states, as a weak cold front, almost a cool front, will be moving through, depositing just a little bit of moisture. We can see that cold front starting to drape again, starting up in Canada, going all the way down right around Oklahoma too. We can start to see those dents again in the jet stream. Playing this through, we can see that it's very, very weak. Actually, really not going to be seeing a lot of moisture. Most places, again, in the Midwest, we'll be seeing, unfortunately, right around under ½ inch of precipitation. Little precipitation as well for Tennessee and Kentucky as a little bit of those remnants move through. And then again, high pressure really building once again in the plains. Really going to be blocking out. But as we can see out in the Pacific, we are eyeing our next large system moving throughout the country. Again, something we're keeping a very close eye on. At another terrific harvest, sunset shot. Jim Diamond of Akron, Colorado, capturing this one. Man, it looks like I wish we could bottle this up and save them for those cool winter days ahead. I'll have more on your forecast coming up.
Updating you on the top story from yesterday morning, McDonald's Quarter Pounder at the center of an E. coli outbreak in some states. Now, Bloomberg reports one of the fast food suppliers, Taylor Farms, is recalling some onions. It comes after the FDA indicated onions as a likely source of contamination in the E. coli outbreak. It's reported it has sickened at least 49 people and led to the death of one person. And a Colorado man has now filed the first lawsuit against McDonald's related to the outbreak. Now, the lawsuit accuses McDonald's of product liability, negligence, and breach of implied warranties. McDonald's president says it's safe to eat at its restaurants. Thousands of blue and gold jacket wearing teens are wrapping up their time in Indianapolis. The 97th National FFA Convention and Expo taking place this week in downtown Indy. Now, the school-based student organization boasts more than 1 million members across the U.S. and its territories. Of that, officials say they expect about 65,000 visitors to convention this year. Members are on hand for national competitions, educational seminars, and an expo along with a host of other activities. The National FFA Convention is slated to remain in Indianapolis through at least 2033. More export business is helping to prop up corn and soybean prices. We'll talk about that next in Markets Now. And later, a 70-year tradition with a new twist. We're off to sweet Louisiana in the country.
Register now for the Milk Business Conference, December 10th and 11th in Vegas, for a chance to win tickets to the National Finals Rodeo while in town.
Soybeans were higher for a fourth straight session, and corn saw some support too. Does it have anything to do with another round of flash sales announced by USDA? We find out from AgDay's Michelle Rook in Markets Now.
Cattle and corn ending higher on Thursday with soybeans a bit lower. Tom Fitzenmeyer is back with analysis. All right, corn is getting pushed here by very strong exports. But I guess the question is, how much higher can you go in the corn market, either before you hit chart resistance or maybe some of these exporters start backing off because of price?
You know, exports have been quite good, surprisingly good, record level actually last week. And we had a darn good ethanol production or ethanol usage number 2 this week. So the demand side of the corn market looks pretty good. The supply side, the farmers locking everything up that they possibly can in the bin. So it's getting harder to buy that corn, at least for a couple of months here. So, you know, I think you could see December corn work back up into that 434 1/4, test that high again. Going beyond that's going to be difficult, I think.
Soybeans also had strong exports, or have, and had a disappointing close on Thursday, though, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, we went up and tested some resistance levels, couldn't hold them at all, ended up closing slightly lower, at least in the November contract. So soybeans have got multiple problems. The chief one is that 550 million bushel carryout the U.S. has, but also you've got the funds don't have as big a short position to cover. The South American weather situation is straightened out. The Chinese apparently are a little nervous about the possibility of tariffs, so they've kind of backed off their buying for after the first of the year.
So the cattle market ended higher. We got pushed by some higher cash trade. Do we go back up and retest the old highs at some point?
Oh, I think so. The cattle market looks quite strong. I think you're going to test that resistance level of 190 on the December contract. I'd certainly think the way we're setting up in the strength of the cash market, you could see that push up through that up to that previous high of around 192. So everything about the cattle market looks pretty good.
Thanks for joining us. Tom Fitzenmeyer with Summit Commodity Brokerage. We'll have more AgDay coming up.
Well, as we know, the drought monitor just came out yesterday, and again, big changes we're starting to see, especially in the heartland of the country. Let's go ahead and take a look at the East Coast. Again, we've been seeing a lot of dryness again, pretty much the entire season in West Virginia up into Ohio, and unfortunately, we haven't really seen a lot of improvement in those areas. Also starting to see some dryness all the way up the East Coast. The big state, though, that we are watching for is Missouri, as we can see parts of extreme drought starting to move into the southeastern part, really drying up a lot of the country and starting to impact yields as well. Again, something keeping a very close eye on. Moving out west, though, we can see, again, a lot of the plains very, very dry, especially Oklahoma down there. Again, a lot of severe and extreme drought situation there. And again, on the border of Montana and again, the Dakotas, we're seeing a lot of extreme drought just because we've been seeing so much high pressure building up and ridging out a lot of the moisture that we should be seeing in the central part of the state. So let's go ahead and time out the jet stream. Again, there goes that weak cold front. Again, not really going to be a champion of moisture there. That being said, this next system that we're eyeing that's out in the Pacific does have a better shot of bringing much of the country a well-needed shot of rainfall. As we can see on Monday, here it is. Here's that trough starting to exit again off of the Pacific and going to right on. And look how deep this trough is really starting to dig. Again, for the eastern part of the country, going to be fairly hot actually on Tuesday. The western part, though, going to be cooler just because we're seeing more of that Canadian air move down, and honestly, could be seeing a good shot of moisture, too. Again, something we're keeping a close eye on. And here's that precipitation outlook, again, for right around Halloween, right in between it. You can see much of the heartland and plains of the country going to get a good shot at moisture there. Again, very good news. And here's that temperature outlook. Again, eastern part of the country, very, very warm, and the western part, fairly cool as well. Colby, Kansas, 64 degrees, low of 36 degrees. Toledo, Iowa, 64 degrees, low of 34 degrees. And Jordan, Montana, mostly sunny, 55-31.
A new president rolls out a new plan for agriculture in Mexico. We'll have details of that coming up next. And later, combining game day enthusiasm with great tasting ice cream. It's a recipe for success in Louisiana. Today in the country. There are reports Tyson Foods is facing a government investigation into claims that it employed children as young as 11 at 2 plants. Several news agencies reporting officials with the Department of Labor searched 2 Tyson Foods plants in northwest Arkansas last month. It comes after 2 separate anonymous reports over the summer that minors were possibly working at the plants. It's reported investigators staked out the Green Forest plant and observed multiple people who were potentially minor employees below the age of 16. Now, AgDay received a response from a Tyson spokesperson who said they do not allow the employment of anyone under the age of 18 at any of their facilities, adding that they take enforcement of labor laws seriously and, quote, "We have fully cooperated with the Department of Labor and they have not provided us with any information that would suggest that any of our policies or practices were violated," end quote. Mexico's new president has announced a new agriculture plan aimed at reviving the country's food production and distribution systems. Now, the Associated Press reporting Claudia Scheinbaum wants to focus on staples such as tortillas, beans, instant coffee, and hot chocolate, which used to be purchased from government stores offering basic goods. She recently emphasized the importance of food sovereignty with a primary goal of increasing domestic bean and corn production. The Agriculture Secretary outlined plans to guarantee prices for corn farmers to stabilize tortilla prices, which have surged in recent years. Now, the government aims to increase bean production by 30% over 6 years in an effort to reduce imports. It also plans to establish research centers for higher yielding bean seeds. However, experts say these policies diverge from current market trends. You know, on those warm fall days, sometimes it's nice to have a little ice cream. Up next, how a special dairy store at LSU is serving up plenty of smiles and some great flavors. That story next in the country. The Louisiana State University Ag Center Dairy Store has a new home, but as LSU Ag Center correspondent Craig Gautreaux says, it still has the same quality ice cream along with some flavors that have a football-themed twist.
After nearly 70 years at the same location, the LSU Ag Center Dairy Store has new digs, but it brought with it the ice cream its customers crave. What makes it so good? Beside quality ingredients, you can bet what you are eating is fresh.
Our ice cream will make a batch, and I would doubt that it lasts a week before we're having to replace that with another batch.
While the recipes have stayed the same for much of those 70 years, some flavors have been forced to change, including the signature Tiger Bite.
It's always been purple and gold, but instead of blueberries like it is now, they used to use blackberries whenever it was very first created.
The store has sold new specialty flavors based on the mascot of the team LSU is facing in football. Flavors like blueberry cobbler for the UCLA Bruins and Ole Miss mud pie for Ole Miss have boosted sales.
We found that latching on to something that we at LSU are so passionate about, which is football game days, especially home game days.
These flavors are sold during the week and on game days, but you need to get there early if you want a taste of the opponent.
If you don't get any During the regular week, there will be some available Saturday mornings, is what I like to typically say, because it is extremely popular on Saturdays.
On a typical day, customers have at least 15 selections to choose from, including some seasonal and novelty flavors. From the LSU campus, this is Craig Gotro reporting.
All right, thanks, Craig, and that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day on Farm Country.